Imagine for a moment that you're trying to use the bathroom, but you're wearing what feels like an entire house made of fabric. Picture yourself wrapped up in so many layers of clothing that you could probably set up a tent and invite your friends over for a sleepover. Your waist is squeezed so tight by a corset that taking a deep breath feels like trying to blow up a balloon that's already full of rocks. And all around you are fancy, proper people who would probably faint dead away if they knew the crazy, clever, and sometimes totally shocking tricks that women back then used when they really needed to go to the bathroom. Today, we're going on an incredible adventure back in time to solve one of history's most mind-blowing puzzles. We're going to discover how Victorian women, those ladies who lived about 150 years ago, managed to handle the most basic thing that every human being needs to do, while they were dressed up like they were wearing entire buildings made of fancy fabric. And let me tell you right now, the solutions they came up with are going to absolutely amaze you, and probably make your jaw drop to the floor. But before we climb into our time machine and travel back to this world full of hidden bathroom pots and secret strategies for using the toilet, I want to know something super cool about you. I want to know where in the whole wide world you're sitting right now while you're reading this story. Are you in your bedroom in California? Maybe you're in a library in London, or perhaps you're on a bus in Brazil. Drop a comment and tell me your country or city, because I think it's absolutely incredible that we can connect with people from all over the planet to explore these amazing historical mysteries together. It's like having friends everywhere who all love learning about the weird and wonderful things people did long ago. And if you're having as much fun as I am diving deep into history's most interesting secrets, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We have so many more mind-blowing stories waiting to be discovered, and trust me, each one is going to surprise you even more than the last one. Now, let's hop in our time machine and transport ourselves back to an era where using the bathroom was basically like playing the world's most complicated game of Twister, except you were wearing a tent, and if you messed up, everyone would be scandalized. Victorian women had to become like secret agents and master strategists, just to answer nature's call when their bodies told them it was time to go. The daily routine of getting dressed for a Victorian woman was like preparing for the most intense battle you could imagine, except instead of armor, she was putting on layers and layers of the most complicated clothing ever invented. She would start her morning by putting on a thin, white linen shift. Think of this like the foundation of a house. It was the very first layer that would protect her expensive, fancy outer clothes from touching her skin directly. This shift was super important because it was the only thing that got washed regularly, and it kept all the other expensive clothes clean. Then came the corset, and oh my goodness, this thing was like wearing a cage made of whalebone and steel around your middle. The corset was laced so incredibly tight that many women actually had their lower ribs permanently change shape over time. Can you imagine that? Their actual bones would slowly move and reshape because of how tight these corsets were pulled. Some women couldn't even take a full, deep breath when they were wearing their corsets. It was like trying to breathe while someone was giving you the world's longest, tightest hug around your waist. Over the corset went multiple petticoats, sometimes as many as 6 or 7 separate layers. Each petticoat was like adding another, fluffy cloud around the woman's legs, making her skirt bigger and more dramatic. But here's where things get really wild. The real engineering marvel was something called a picture a giant bird cage, but instead of holding a bird, it was designed to hold a woman's skirt in the perfect bell shape. This crinoline was like a mobile architecture project. It was made of steel hoops that were connected by fabric tapes, and it could extend up to 6 feet in diameter. That means a woman wearing a full crinoline was basically as wide as a small car. These contraptions were so enormous that special furniture had to be designed just so women could sit down. Doorways had to be navigated very carefully, and walking through a room required the same kind of planning you might use to move a refrigerator. Some of these crinoline structures were so massive that when women sat down, the back of their skirt would flip up like a seesaw, and they had to have special techniques just to keep everything properly arranged. Imagine trying to sit in a chair while wearing a hula hoop that's 6 feet wide. That's basically what these women dealt with every single day. Living inside this mobile architecture meant that Victorian women had to completely reimagine how they approached the most basic human needs. Using the bathroom became like performing in a circus act that required incredible planning, often assistance from other people. and definitely a huge amount of creativity and problem-solving skills. The chamber pot became the star of this daily drama. These weren't just simple containers like you might imagine. They were carefully engineered solutions to incredibly complex problems. Women's chamber pots were specifically designed with oval shapes and curved interiors that could nestle properly between all those layers of fabric and petticoats. The better quality ones came with tight-fitting lids, not just to control smells, but as a clear signal to the household servants about whether the pot was currently in use or needed to be emptied. In wealthy households, these essential bathroom items were hidden inside the most elegant furniture pieces you could imagine. Chairs were designed with secret compartments that could hide chamber pots. Decorative cabinets concealed multiple pots for different family members. Elaborate wooden commodes disguised their true bathroom purpose behind beautiful craftsmanship that looked like regular furniture. If you walked into a Victorian parlor, you might be sitting just inches away from someone's personal bathroom without even knowing it. The servants in these grand homes moved through the house like silent ninjas, checking, emptying, and maintaining these hidden bathroom systems throughout the day. They had to be incredibly discreet, because talking about bathroom needs was considered extremely rude and improper. These servants developed almost supernatural skills at knowing exactly when chamber pots needed attention without anyone having to say a word about it. They could tell by the smallest signals a certain way a lady would arrange her skirts, a particular glance, or even just the time of day and the lady's usual schedule. The actual process of using these chamber pots required remarkable skill and coordination that would probably impress Olympic gymnasts. A Victorian lady couldn't simply lift her skirts like you might lift a modern dress. We're talking about potentially 20 pounds of fabric, steel framework, and intricate lacework that all had to be managed simultaneously. Instead, these women had to master a technique that was equal parts ballet dancing and engineering. Problem solving. The key was all about positioning and strategy. The oval chamber pot would be carefully placed beneath the voluminous skirts, and through a combination of very careful positioning and strategic fabric arrangement, the entire bathroom process could be completed without removing even a single layer of clothing. It was like performing magic. Everything happened underneath all those layers, completely hidden from view. The women had to learn exactly how to position their bodies, how to arrange the crinoline hoops, and how to manage all that fabric without making any suspicious rustling sounds or awkward movements. At formal events like fancy balls and elegant dinner parties, this whole system became even more elaborate and complex. Grand ballrooms and elegant homes featured special rooms called retiring rooms. These were essentially Victorian bathroom lounges where ladies could handle their personal needs with proper assistance. These rooms were like pit stops at a race track, but for bathroom needs. They were usually decorated beautifully to maintain the illusion that nothing unpleasant was happening there. These retiring rooms were staffed with maids, who functioned like the most skilled pit crews you could imagine. They helped position the multiple layers of fabric, ensured proper placement of the chamber pot, and provided cleanup assistance afterward. These maids were trained in the art of discretion. They knew exactly how to help a lady manage her enormous skirts, how to position the chamber pot for maximum effectiveness, and how to clean up quickly and efficiently. The whole operation had to be completed with such incredible discretion that other guests at the party wouldn't even notice that a lady had stepped away from the festivities. The maids also had to be experts in reading non-verbal cues. A lady couldn't simply announce that she needed to use the bathroom. That would have been scandalous. Instead, she might fan herself in a particular way, touch her glove to her temple, or make some other subtle signal that the trained staff would recognize. Immediately, the maid would then discreetly approach and whisper something like, "Perhaps Madam would like to refresh her powder," which was code for "Let's go handle your bathroom situation right now." These women were absolute masters of maintaining perfect composure and elegance while dealing with some seriously challenging logistics. They could carry on conversations, smile gracefully, and appear completely relaxed while internally calculating the complex physics required to manage their bathroom needs without creating a social scandal. They had to time everything perfectly, knowing how long they could wait, planning their fluid intake throughout the day, and even coordinating with other ladies to avoid conflicts over the retiring rooms. The social etiquette around these bathroom breaks was incredibly complex. Ladies had to excuse themselves from conversations in just the right way. using coded language that everyone understood but no one would acknowledge directly. They might say they needed to check on their appearance or attend to their toilette or refresh themselves. Everyone knew what this really meant, but the polite fiction had to be maintained at all costs. But here's where things get really interesting, and this information might absolutely shock you. For much of the Victorian era, many women didn't wear what we would recognize as underwear at all. The massive volume of petticoats and crinolines meant that traditional undergarments weren't considered necessary. The layers of fabric provided enough coverage and modesty, or so everyone thought at the time. Can you imagine that? These women were walking around in public, attending fancy parties, and going about their daily lives with absolutely nothing on underneath. All those layers except their shift and corset. This might seem completely crazy to us today, but it actually made a lot of practical sense when you think about it. With 6 or 7 layers of petticoats, plus the crinoline structure, plus the heavy outer dress, adding another layer of clothing would have made the whole outfit even more unbearably hot and heavy. Victorian women were already carrying around what felt like a small house worth of fabric, so eliminating one layer wherever possible was actually pretty smart. But this non-underwear situation created some absolutely hilarious and embarrassing problems that became the talk of entire towns and cities. Picture this scene: a proper Victorian lady walking down a busy street on a particularly windy day. She's minding her own business, probably thinking about what she's going to have for tea, or whether she remembered to tell the cook about dinner preparations. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind catches her enormous skirt and flips the entire crinoline structure upward, like an umbrella turning inside out during a storm. In an instant, this dignified lady would find herself completely exposed from the waist down in front of everyone on the street: shopkeepers, other ladies, gentlemen, children, servants, and anyone else who happened to be nearby. The crinoline would act like a giant sail, catching the wind and flipping up to reveal everything underneath. The poor woman would be standing there in broad daylight, essentially naked from the waist down, while her skirt formed a huge dome over her head. These embarrassing episodes became so common that they were actually reported in newspapers as entertainment for readers. People would write letters to editors describing the funny incidents they had witnessed. Some newspapers even started keeping track of how many crinoline incidents happened in their city each week. The whole thing became a source of public amusement, though obviously not for the poor women who experienced these wardrobe malfunctions. The wind wasn't the only enemy of the crinoline. Getting into carriages was a major challenge because the hoops could flip up unexpectedly. Sitting down too quickly could cause the back of the dress to fly up like a seesaw. Even walking upstairs could be dangerous if the crinoline got caught on something or if the woman stepped on her own skirt. There were countless ways for these massive contraptions to betray their wearers at the most inconvenient moments. Society finally decided that perhaps some additional coverage might be a wise idea after these incidents became too frequent and too public to ignore. The solution that was developed was absolutely revolutionary for its time and showed incredible ingenuity. Split crotch drawers. These weren't solid undergarments like modern underwear, but rather 2 separate pant legs connected only at the waistband, with strategic openings in the middle. Picture 2 tube socks that are sewn together at the top, but completely open in between. This design was pure genius when you think about all the problems it solved simultaneously. First, it provided modesty and coverage when needed, protecting women from those embarrassing wind incidents and crinoline malfunctions. If the skirt flipped up, there would be fabric covering the important areas instead of complete exposure. Second, and perhaps more importantly, the split construction meant that women could handle all their bathroom needs without having to remove or adjust their undergarments at all. Think about how brilliant this was from a practical standpoint. Remember, these women were wearing 20 pounds of clothing with corsets laced so tight they could barely breathe. The idea of having to unlace, remove, and then relace all those layers just to use the bathroom was completely impractical. With split crotch drawers, they could simply position themselves over the chamber pot and take care of business without disturbing any other part of their outfit. The drawers were usually made of soft cotton or linen, and were often decorated with beautiful embroidery, lace trim, or ribbon details. Even though they were underwear that no one was supposed to see, Victorian women still wanted them to be pretty and feminine. Some wealthy women had dozens of pairs in different styles and fabrics. treating them like any other part of their wardrobe. Split crotch design also made the drawers much easier to wash and dry, which was important for hygiene. Since they were essentially two separate pieces connected at the waist, they could be laid flat to dry and didn't require the same careful handling as more complex undergarments. This was especially important because these were the garments that needed to be washed most frequently. Interestingly, the split crotch drawers became a source of some controversy among different social classes. Some very conservative people thought that any kind of underwear was improper and immodest, believing that good women shouldn't need such things. Others argued that the split design was actually more scandalous than wearing nothing at all, since it seemed to acknowledge and accommodate bodily functions that proper ladies weren't supposed to have. But practical women quickly embraced this innovation because it solved so many daily problems. The drawers provided protection from embarrassing exposure incidents, while maintaining the convenience needed for managing bathroom needs in those incredibly complicated outfits. It was like having the best of both worlds, modesty when you needed it, and practicality when you needed that too. The logistics of Victorian bathroom routines extended far beyond just the mechanical aspects of using chamber pots and managing enormous skirts. When we think about the complete picture of bathroom needs, we have to consider all the cleaning, supplies and hygiene products that were available at the time. And let me tell you, the situation was quite different from what we're used to today. Toilet paper as we know it today didn't exist until very late in the Victorian period, and even then it was considered a luxury item that only the wealthiest families could afford. Instead, people used whatever materials were available and practical. Old newspapers were very common. Families would save their daily papers specifically for bathroom use. The ink would sometimes rub off on people's skin, leaving them with newsprint stains. But it was better than the alternatives. Catalogue pages were another popular option, especially the thick, glossy pages from fancy store catalogues. These were actually preferred over newspaper because the paper was usually softer and the ink was less likely to transfer. Some families would specifically request extra catalogues from stores just to use for bathroom purposes. The Sears catalogue was particularly prized for this use because it had so many pages and the paper quality was relatively good in rural areas. People got even more creative with their cleaning materials. Corn cobs were incredibly common. After eating corn on the cob, families would save the cobs, let them dry out, and use them for bathroom purposes. They were actually quite effective because the rough texture helped with cleaning, and they were completely natural and biodegradable. Leaves from certain trees were also popular, especially large, soft leaves like mullein or lamb's ear that grew wild in many areas. For wealthy Victorian women, soft linen cloths were the preferred option. For personal hygiene, these weren't disposable like modern toilet paper. They were reusable cloths that could be laundered along with other household linens. The cloths were usually cut into small squares and kept in special containers near the chamber pots. After use, they would be collected by servants and taken to the laundry area for washing. This system of reusable bathroom cloths provided a much more comfortable experience than the rougher alternatives like newspaper or corn cobs, but it also created additional work for the household staff. The cloths had to be carefully managed and maintained, washed in very hot water with strong soap, and then dried thoroughly to prevent any hygiene problems. Some households had dozens of these cloths in rotation to ensure there were always clean ones available. The monthly challenge of menstruation presented yet another layer of complexity to an already incredibly complicated system. This is a topic that was absolutely never discussed openly in Victorian society, but it was obviously something that every woman had to deal with, regardless of how taboo it was to talk about. Victorian women dealt with their periods using homemade cloth pads and a system called the tea bandage, essentially a cloth belt system that held absorbent materials in place around their waist and between their legs. The name tea bandage came from the fact that these belts were often made from old tea, towels or similar cloth materials that were soft and absorbent. The absorbent materials used during menstruation varied widely depending on what was available and what the family could afford. Soft rags and cotton were the preferred options for wealthy women. These materials were comfortable and effective, and they could be washed and reused many times. Middle-class women might use a combination of cotton and other softer fabrics, while poorer women had to make do with whatever cloth materials they could find. In rural areas, women got incredibly creative with natural materials. Moss was surprisingly popular because it was naturally absorbent and had some antibacterial properties. Women would collect certain types of moss, dry it thoroughly, and use it as padding inside their cloth belts. Sheep's wool was another common option. It was soft, absorbent, and readily available in farming communities. Some women used materials that might seem shocking to us today. Cotton batting from old quilts or pillows was sometimes repurposed for menstrual use. Old cloth diapers that babies had outgrown were cut up and used as menstrual pads. Even soft paper, materials like tissue paper or wrapping paper, were sometimes used by women who could afford such luxuries. Women had to change these makeshift pads frequently throughout the day, often 12 to 20 times during heavy flow days. Can you imagine trying to manage this while wearing a corset, 6 layers of petticoats, and a crinoline that made you 6 feet wide? All of this changing and adjusting had to be managed beneath those enormous skirts, often without any assistance from other people, and always in complete silence. The logistics were mind-boggling. Women had to carry extra supplies with them whenever they left the house, hidden somewhere in their clothing or in small bags. They had to plan their daily activities around their menstrual needs, knowing that changing pads would require finding a private space and performing complex maneuvers under all those layers of fabric. Society's expectations of feminine propriety meant that menstruation was never, ever discussed openly, even among women who were close friends or family members. Mothers had to teach their daughters about managing their periods through whispered conversations and secret demonstrations, passing down techniques like classified information from one generation to the next. The secrecy around menstruation was so intense that many young women reached their first period without any idea what was happening to them. They had received no education about their bodies or what to expect, and suddenly they were faced with this monthly challenge that they had to figure out how to manage while maintaining perfect social composure. The washing and maintenance of menstrual supplies added another dimension to the household's laundry challenges. The cloth pads and belts had to be washed separately from other clothing, using very hot water and strong soap to ensure proper hygiene. They had to be dried completely to prevent bacterial growth, but they also had to be dried discreetly so that no one would see them hanging on the clothesline. Some households had special washing areas, specifically for dealing with menstrual supplies, hidden away from the main laundry operations. Servants who handled this washing were sworn to secrecy, and were often given extra pay for dealing with such delicate and private matters. The washing and maintenance of Victorian clothing added yet another dimension to these daily challenges that most people today would find absolutely overwhelming. Those elaborate dresses with their yards and yards of fabric, intricate beadwork, delicate lace trim, and expensive materials couldn't be washed frequently like modern clothes. In fact, many of these gorgeous gowns were never fully washed at all during their entire lifetime of use. Many households only did major laundry twice a year during events called Great Wash Days, when the entire household would focus on cleaning all the major clothing items. These were massive undertakings that required days of preparation and involved every servant in the house. The Great Wash Days were like military operations, with careful planning, specific schedules, and everyone working together to handle the enormous amount of washing, rinsing, and drying that needed to be done. Instead of regular washing, the expensive outer dresses were maintained through a daily routine of careful brushing, airing out in fresh air, and the liberal application of special powders designed to absorb odors and oils from the body. Women would spend time each evening brushing their dresses with special clothes brushes, working systematically from top to bottom to remove dust, lint, and any surface dirt. The airing out process was equally important. Dresses would be hung in well-ventilated areas, sometimes outdoors on nice days, to allow fresh air to circulate through the fabric and help eliminate any odors that had accumulated during wear. Some wealthy households had special rooms just for airing out clothes, with good ventilation and protection from direct sunlight that might fade the colors. The powders used for odor control were fascinating mixtures of various ingredients. Some contained cornstarch or rice powder to absorb oils, while others included dried herbs like lavender or rosemary for pleasant scents. Wealthy women might use expensive imported powders with exotic ingredients, while middle-class families made their own mixtures using whatever materials they could find or afford. The undergarments that actually came into contact with the skin, the shifts, chemises, and later the split-crotch drawers, were washed much more frequently than the outer clothes. These washable layers served as protection for the expensive outer garments, and were considered absolutely essential for maintaining hygiene beneath those rarely cleaned elaborate dresses. This system of layered clothing with washable undergarments was actually quite clever from a hygiene standpoint. The expensive outer dress might be worn many times without washing, but the layer that touched the body was changed and washed regularly. It was like having a protective barrier that kept the expensive clothes clean, while ensuring that the person wearing them maintained reasonable hygiene standards. Victorian ingenuity extended to public bathroom facilities as well, though these were quite different from anything we would recognize today. The garderobe system, inherited from medieval times, involved strategically placed openings in upper-story buildings that allowed waste to be disposed of directly onto the streets below. These weren't really bathrooms in any modern sense, they were just holes in the floor of upper rooms that opened directly to the outside. The famous warning cry "Guard Eslo," meaning "watch out for the water," gave pedestrians a chance to dodge whatever was being emptied from the windows above. People walking down city streets had to be constantly alert for these warnings and ready to jump out of the way quickly. The water being thrown out wasn't just bathroom waste, it included all kinds of household liquids, from dishwater to chamber pot contents to leftover cooking liquids. This system created some pretty disgusting conditions in city streets. As you might imagine, the waste would accumulate in gutters and create terrible smells, especially during hot weather. It also created health hazards, as diseases could spread through contaminated water and waste materials. But for many people, especially those living in crowded urban areas, this was the only waste disposal system available. Public facilities for women were extremely rare and usually quite primitive when they did exist. Most public buildings simply didn't have any accommodation for women's bathroom needs, operating under the assumption that proper ladies wouldn't be out in public long enough to require such facilities. When women did need to use public facilities, they often had to rely on the kindness of shopkeepers or inn owners who might allow them to use private facilities. Interestingly, chamber pot contents weren't always considered just waste to be thrown away. During certain periods, including various wars, government agents would actually go around collecting urine from households because it could be processed into saltpeter, a crucial ingredient for making gunpowder. Families would be paid small amounts for their contribution to the war effort, turning their personal bathroom waste into a source of income. The process of making saltpeter from urine was quite complex and involved letting the urine ferment for long periods, then processing it through various chemical treatments. The resulting saltpeter was then combined with charcoal and sulfur to make gunpowder for military use, so your personal bathroom waste could literally help fuel military campaigns and contribute to national defense efforts. This urine collection system created an interesting economic opportunity for some people. Entrepreneurs would set up collection routes through neighborhoods, offering to pay families for their chamber pot contents. Some households would save up their urine for weeks to get better prices from the collectors. It was like having a recycling program, except instead of bottles and cans, people were recycling their bathroom waste. The social aspects of Victorian bathroom culture were equally fascinating and quite different from our modern expectations of privacy. Privacy as we understand it today simply didn't exist for most people, especially in working-class families who lived in small spaces with many family members. Families routinely used chamber pots in front of each other, and children grew up seeing bathroom activities as just another part of daily life, like eating or sleeping. At social gatherings, the bathroom etiquette was completely different from what we would expect today. Gentlemen would simply step into the garden to handle their needs among the flower beds, and this was considered perfectly normal and acceptable behavior. Host families would actually designate certain areas of their gardens for this purpose, sometimes even providing special screening plants or decorative structures to offer a bit of privacy. The lack of privacy extended to servants as well, who often had to share chamber pots and had very limited access to private bathroom facilities. In large households, servants might have to wait in line to use the few chamber pots available to them, and they certainly didn't have the luxury of retiring rooms or personal assistants that the wealthy family members enjoyed. Despite all these incredible challenges and complications that would probably drive most modern people absolutely crazy, Victorian women somehow managed to maintain their reputations for grace, elegance, and perfect manners. They developed intricate systems, techniques, and social protocols that allowed them to navigate these daily challenges while upholding the extremely strict standards of propriety that defined their era. It's honestly amazing when you think about the level of skill and mental toughness required just to get through a normal day. The ingenuity required to manage basic human functions while wearing what amounted to portable architecture speaks to the incredible adaptability and resourcefulness of Victorian women. They created solutions that were practical, discreet, and effective, even if they seemed shocking, amusing, or completely impractical to our modern sensibilities. These women were essentially engineers, constantly problem-solving and innovating to make their daily lives workable within the constraints of their society's expectations. This glimpse into Victorian bathroom culture reveals so much about the era's values, social structures, and the incredible lengths people went to maintain appearances while dealing with universal human needs that every person experiences regardless of time period or social class. It's a fascinating reminder that throughout history, people have always found ways to adapt to their circumstances, no matter how challenging or seemingly impossible they might appear to outsiders looking back from a different time. These women were true pioneers in problem-solving, creating systems and techniques that allowed them to function successfully in a world that seemed specifically designed to make the most basic human activities as complicated and difficult as possible. They turned necessity into an art form, developing solutions that were so sophisticated they could maintain perfect elegance even in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. What's particularly remarkable, when you think about it, is how these elaborate rituals and complicated procedures became so completely normalized that they were simply accepted as part of daily life. Victorian women developed an almost military-like precision in managing their clothing, their daily schedules, and their personal needs. They had to plan their entire day around the logistics of their wardrobe, calculating how long they could go without access to proper bathroom facilities, timing their fluid intake throughout the day, and even coordinating with other women to share retiring rooms and assistance. The psychological resilience required to maintain dignity and composure while dealing with these challenges cannot be overstated. Imagine the incredible mental fortitude needed to attend a formal dinner party with dozens of other guests, engage in witty conversation about literature and current events, dance gracefully to complex musical pieces, and maintain perfect posture throughout a 6-hour evening, all while managing the physical discomfort of a tightly laced corset that made breathing difficult and the constant awareness that any bathroom emergency would require a complex logistical operation involving multiple people and careful planning. These women had to develop an almost supernatural level of body awareness and control. They learned to read their own physical signals with incredible precision, knowing exactly how long they could wait before needing bathroom facilities, understanding how different foods and drinks would affect their digestive systems, and planning their daily activities around these biological realities while never ever letting anyone else know that such planning was necessary. Victorian women also developed their own secret networks of knowledge and support that operated completely outside the view of men and general society. These networks were like underground information systems, where crucial knowledge was passed from woman to woman through whispered conversations, coded gestures, and carefully orchestrated demonstrations. Mothers taught daughters the intricate techniques required for managing their elaborate clothing systems, through careful demonstrations and whispered instructions that often took place late at night or in the privacy of dressing rooms. These lessons covered everything from the proper way to position a chamber pot beneath multiple layers of petticoats to the subtle art of communicating bathroom needs through fan language and other nonverbal signals. Servants became absolute experts in the subtle art of assistance, knowing exactly how to help without drawing any attention to what was happening. The best ladies' maids could help a woman manage her bathroom needs so smoothly and discreetly that even other people in the same room wouldn't notice anything unusual was happening. These servants developed their own training systems, with experienced maids teaching newer staff the complex skills required for this delicate work. Female friends developed coded language and discrete signals for communicating bathroom needs at social events, without breaching the strict rules of polite conversation. They might use specific fan movements, particular ways of adjusting their gloves, or seemingly innocent comments about checking their appearance or needing fresh air, to communicate their needs to each other and to trained staff members. The economic impact of these clothing systems was absolutely enormous and affected entire industries and employment sectors. Wealthy families employed entire teams of servants whose primary job was maintaining the complex wardrobe requirements of the household's women. Laundresses specialized in the delicate art of cleaning expensive fabrics without damaging them. Ladies' maids became experts in dressing, undressing, and maintaining elaborate clothing systems. Seamstresses and tailors developed new techniques for creating garments that could accommodate the complex requirements of Victorian fashion while still being somewhat practical for daily wear. The amount of human labor required just to keep one Victorian lady properly dressed and maintained throughout a single day was truly staggering. It might take 2 or 3 servants working together for an hour just to get a woman dressed in the morning, and the same amount of time and effort to undress her at night. Throughout the day, servants would be constantly maintaining, adjusting, and monitoring various aspects of her clothing and personal care needs. This created a whole economy of specialized workers and craftspeople. There were corset makers who understood the complex engineering required to create supportive but wearable undergarments. Crinoline manufacturers developed new techniques for creating lighter but stronger hoop structures. Even furniture makers had to adapt their designs to accommodate the enormous skirts that Victorian women wore. Interestingly, the inconvenience and impracticality of these clothing systems may have actually contributed to some positive social changes over time. The difficulty of managing such elaborate dress encouraged wealthy women to spend more time at home or in controlled social environments, which inadvertently led to increased focus on domestic arts, education, and intellectual pursuits. Some historians argue that the sheer impracticality of Victorian fashion actually pushed women toward more sedentary but intellectually engaging activities, contributing to advances in literature, art, and social reform. Movements. When you can't move around easily or participate in physical activities, you have more time and motivation to focus on reading, writing, painting, music, and other intellectual pursuits. The evolution away from these extreme fashion constraints didn't happen overnight. It took decades of gradual change, influenced by everything from bicycle riding becoming popular among women to the practical demands of World War I, which required women to take on more active roles in society and the workforce. The enormous crinolines gradually gave way to bustles, which then evolved into more practical skirt designs that allowed for greater mobility and independence. The bicycle craze of the 1890s was actually one of the most important factors in changing women's fashion. When bicycles became popular as both transportation and recreation, women suddenly needed clothing that would allow them to pedal, balance, and move freely. You simply cannot ride a bicycle while wearing a 6-foot-wide crinoline. It's physically impossible. This created the first real pressure for practical clothing that had existed in decades. Some brave women started wearing divided skirts or even bloomers for bicycle riding, which caused enormous social scandals at first. People were absolutely shocked to see women wearing anything that resembled pants, even if they were hidden under long skirts. Newspapers wrote angry editorials about the decline of feminine modesty, and some churches even banned women who wore bicycle costumes from attending services. But the practical advantages of more sensible clothing were undeniable. Women who could ride bicycles had greater freedom to travel, to work, and to participate in social activities. They could get around cities more easily, visit friends and family more often, and even take jobs that required them to travel between different locations. The economic and social benefits of this increased mobility gradually overcame the conservative resistance to fashion changes. World War I created even more dramatic pressure for practical women's clothing. When men went off to fight in the war, women had to take over jobs in factories, farms, offices, and other workplaces that required physical activity and practical clothing. You cannot operate factory machinery while wearing a corset laced so tight you can't breathe. And you certainly can't work in a munitions factory while wearing a dress that makes you 6 feet wide. The war created a situation where practical considerations absolutely had to take priority over fashion ideals. Women working in factories needed clothing that was safe around machinery, allowed for full range of motion, and could be washed easily and frequently. The elaborate, delicate fabrics and complex construction of Victorian dresses were completely unsuitable for this kind of work. This period saw the introduction of more practical undergarments, simpler dress designs, and even the shocking acceptance of women wearing pants in certain work situations. The changes that had been slowly developing over decades suddenly accelerated dramatically as society adapted to wartime necessities. The psychological impact of these clothing changes was enormous as well. Women who had spent their entire lives managing complex, restrictive clothing systems suddenly experienced the freedom of being able to move naturally, breathe deeply, and handle their personal needs without requiring assistance from other people. This physical freedom contributed to growing demands for social and political freedom as well. The suffrage movement, which fought for women's right to vote, was closely connected to these changes in clothing and lifestyle. Women who could move freely, work independently, and manage their own daily needs were much more likely to demand political rights and social equality. The practical experience of greater physical freedom led naturally to demands for greater social and political freedom. Looking back at these elaborate systems and complicated daily routines, it's easy to see them as quaint historical curiosities, or amusing examples of how impractical people used to be, but they actually reveal something quite profound about human adaptability and creativity. Victorian women didn't just survive these challenges, they absolutely mastered them, creating elegant solutions to seemingly impossible problems. They developed techniques that allowed them to maintain their dignity, their health, and their social standing, while navigating some of the most impractical clothing ever designed by human beings. The level of skill, coordination, and mental toughness required to function successfully in these elaborate clothing systems was truly remarkable. The legacy of Victorian ingenuity extends far beyond just bathroom logistics and clothing management. These women pioneered approaches to problem-solving, discretion, and social coordination that influenced everything from fashion design to social etiquette to the development of modern plumbing and sanitation systems. Their experiences and the solutions they developed directly contributed to the push for more practical clothing designs and better public health infrastructure that we benefit from today. The Victorian emphasis on hygiene and cleanliness, even within the constraints of their elaborate clothing systems, helped establish many of the sanitation practices that we now take for granted. The careful attention to washing undergarments, maintaining clean chamber pots, and managing personal hygiene contributed to better understanding of disease prevention and public health. The furniture innovations developed to accommodate Victorian clothing, chairs with hidden compartments, adjustable seating, and specialized storage solutions, influenced furniture design for generations. Many of these design principles are still used today in creating furniture that serves multiple functions or accommodates special needs. Even the social protocols developed by Victorian women for managing delicate situations with discretion and grace continue to influence modern etiquette and social interaction. The art of communicating sensitive information through subtle signals, the importance of maintaining dignity under challenging circumstances, and the value of mutual support among women facing similar challenges are all lessons that remain relevant today. The economic systems that developed around Victorian fashion, specialized craftspeople, service industries, and support networks helped establish many of the business models that we still see in modern fashion and personal care industries. The concept of personal styling services, specialized cleaning and maintenance services, and custom-fitted clothing all have their roots in the elaborate support systems that Victorian women required. Perhaps most importantly, the Victorian experience demonstrates the incredible human capacity for adaptation and innovation under challenging circumstances. When faced with seemingly impossible constraints, these women didn't simply accept defeat or complain about their situation. Instead, they developed creative solutions, built support networks, and found ways to maintain their quality of life, while working within the limitations imposed by their society. This adaptability and resourcefulness became part of the cultural legacy passed down through generations. The problem-solving skills, attention to detail, and ability to maintain grace under pressure that Victorian women developed out of necessity became valued traits that influenced how subsequent generations approached challenges in their own lives. The gradual transition away from these extreme fashion constraints also demonstrates how social change happens over time. It wasn't a sudden revolution that immediately freed women from restrictive clothing, but rather a gradual process of adaptation, experimentation, and social acceptance that took place over several decades. Each small change built on previous changes, creating momentum for larger transformations. So the next time you effortlessly use a modern bathroom, slip into comfortable clothing, or handle any personal care routine with ease and complete privacy, take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey that brought us from chamber pots and crinoline cages to the convenience we enjoy today. The Victorian women who navigated these daily challenges with grace and determination paved the way for the freedoms and conveniences we now take for granted without even thinking about them. Their story reminds us that human innovation often comes from the most unexpected places and circumstances. Sometimes the greatest advances in convenience and comfort are born from the most inconvenient and uncomfortable situations. When people are faced with seemingly impossible challenges, they often develop the most creative and ingenious solutions that end up benefiting everyone who comes after them. Victorian women transformed necessity into art, creating systems so sophisticated that they maintained elegance even in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. They proved that human dignity and grace can be preserved even when dealing with the most basic and universal human needs. Regardless of how complicated the circumstances might be, the ingenuity they displayed in solving daily problems, from engineering the perfect chamber pot placement to developing coded communication systems for bathroom needs, shows us that innovation isn't just about big technological breakthroughs or scientific discoveries. Sometimes the most important innovations are the small, practical solutions that make daily life more manageable and dignified for ordinary people. These women also demonstrated the power of community and mutual support in overcoming challenges. The secret networks of knowledge they created, the discreet assistance they provided to each other, and the social protocols they developed all show how people can work together to make difficult situations more bearable. They understood that individual problems often require collective solutions, and they built systems of support that helped everyone navigate the same challenges more successfully. The psychological resilience that Victorian women developed in managing these daily challenges is truly inspiring. They learned to maintain composure and dignity while dealing with physical discomfort, social constraints, and logistical complications that would probably overwhelm many people today. Their ability to find grace and elegance within such restrictive circumstances shows us something important about the human capacity for adaptation and perseverance. Perhaps most remarkably, these women managed to maintain their sense of identity and personal agency even within a system that seemed designed to limit their freedom and independence. They found ways to express their creativity, intelligence, and individuality, despite wearing clothing that restricted their movement and social expectations that limited their public roles. They proved that the human spirit can find ways to flourish, even under the most constraining circumstances. The transition from Victorian fashion constraints to modern clothing freedom also teaches us valuable lessons about social change and progress. Change doesn't always happen quickly or easily, but persistent pressure from practical needs and changing social circumstances can eventually overcome even the most entrenched traditions and expectations. The women who gradually pushed for more practical clothing, who insisted on their right to ride bicycles and work outside the home, who demanded better public facilities and more reasonable fashion choices, all contributed to the freedoms that we enjoy today. Their experience reminds us not to take our current conveniences for granted. The simple act of using a modern bathroom, with privacy, running water, toilet paper, and comfortable clothing, represents the culmination of centuries of gradual improvements and innovations. Every convenience we enjoy today was once someone's impossible dream or desperate necessity. The story of Victorian bathroom culture also highlights the importance of talking openly about basic human needs and experiences. The extreme secrecy and shame that surrounded normal bodily functions in Victorian society created unnecessary complications and difficulties for everyone involved. The gradual movement toward more open and practical discussions of hygiene, health, and personal care has made life better and easier for everyone. Modern innovations in clothing design, bathroom facilities, and personal care products all build on the foundation of knowledge and experience that previous generations developed through trial and error. The Victorian women who experimented with different clothing solutions, who tested various hygiene practices, and who gradually pushed for more practical approaches to daily life, were essentially conducting research that benefits all of us today. Their legacy extends beyond just practical improvements to include important lessons about human dignity, creativity, and resilience. They showed us that people can maintain their humanity and grace even under the most challenging circumstances, and that individual and collective ingenuity can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. And that's the incredible hidden story of how Victorian women managed one of life's most basic needs, while dressed like walking works of art. It's a testament to human creativity, resilience, and the lengths people will go to maintain dignity in any situation, no matter how challenging or seemingly impossible it might appear. What did you think of this amazing journey into Victorian bathroom culture? Were you as amazed as I was by the incredible ingenuity and complexity of these daily routines that these remarkable women had to master just to get through each day? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to let me know where you're watching from. Connecting with viewers from around the world makes exploring these fascinating historical mysteries even more exciting and meaningful. If you enjoyed diving deep into this hidden side of history, discovering the secrets and strategies that people use to navigate daily life in completely different circumstances, you'll definitely want to subscribe, because we have so many more incredible stories waiting to be uncovered. From ancient beauty secrets that will absolutely shock you to medieval dining habits that will completely change how you think about food and social customs, we're constantly exploring the fascinating, weird, and wonderful aspects of how people lived throughout history. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey through time, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll uncover another amazing historical mystery that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the past and appreciating the remarkable ingenuity of the people who came before us.